What is going on, guys? It is Daniel Wright, and you are here listening to another episode of Paving the Way. Happy Wednesday to you. I'm happy to have you as always. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in this week. I know last week I put out a replay, a rerun. I was heading out of town last week. I was trying to get 5 days of work done in about 2 days. And truthfully, I just ran short on time, and I didn't want to put out some BS episode just to check the box, so I threw out a replay. Then when I was watching the replay while I was traveling on Wednesday, I realized it was a replay episode of terrible audio. So if you actually tuned in last week to watch the replay, hopefully you made it past the first 6 minutes or so, which the audio sucked. If you didn't, I don't blame you. So it is what it is. But here we are this week on episode 154, talking about three specifically, things I wish I knew when I started my business. So I actually did a little bit of thinking, kind of a little bit of, I guess you call it research in a way, of coming up with kind of three main things that through my journey that I've learned I wish I would have either known earlier on or put more time and emphasis on earlier on. So I want to talk a little bit about those today. I actually do have notes here, so I'm going to try and stay on track with them because I think they're going to be valuable to either you or someone you might know, because, you know, when you share it with people who you know that could benefit from it, it helps everybody. Wink, wink, hint, hint. But nonetheless, I want to talk a little bit about thinking big and systemizing early. I want to talk about building a culture from the get-go, and I want to talk about investing in yourself to become a better leader. So with all that being said, guys, let's get started. All right, guys, well, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So this is going to be geared for the person who is just starting out in their business right now, the person who's a few years into their business right now, or a person who's a few decades into their business right now. Because let's face it, the best business owners, the best business leaders are always looking to learn. They're always looking for tidbits, tips, tricks, and reminders of what they need to be doing or what they should start doing in their business to make it the best possible. The first topic we're going to talk about today is early on, I wish I would have thought bigger and systemized our processes, right? If you guys have been listening to me for any amount of time, you know that I am huge on systems and processes. You know, I've always said before, you know, systems scale, people don't, right? You can't scale chaos. You scale systems, right? And so with that being said, when I started early on in Proline, it was very much, you know, you guys have heard the origin story before. It was a part-time job when I was a fireman. I got into it. The guy who started the company, he had it as a part-time job. He got promoted, and then you didn't have time to run anymore. So I bought it from him, one-man band with a couple of helpers here and there, and that's what I was doing. And I didn't really think about what the system was that we were doing or the process was. I was just doing it. You know, I realized that, okay, this line needs painted. I have a machine to paint the line. I'm just going to go paint the line. You know, and then if I had a helper coming along, I kind of showed them once or twice, hey, this is how you do it. All right, now you go do it and figure it out. So it wasn't so much about kind of documenting the systems and the processes early on, because I was just worried about getting it done. And sure, there's always going to be a time frame when you start doing something new to you that you have to take time to figure it out. And then the next step is going to be to document what you're doing once you've figured it out. That doesn't mean that it's never going to change. It's never going to advance. But nonetheless, you at least have a starting point, so that way when you hire someone else to come on board, you can have either documented videos, a written manual, a typed up, whatever it may be, depending on whatever job or process or job or activity that they're needing to do is going to be what determines how you're going to document it. Over the last couple of, probably year to 2 years, we've done a ton of video documentation. We've got a fantastic operations team, fantastic media person who's been helping us over the last year and a half to really clean everything up and actually build out a formal onboarding training portal, like a whole online learning platform. Now, obviously, early on, I'm not going to invest in all that, right? I'm not going to invest in the cameras and the equipment and the platforms and so on and so forth. But what's wrong with making videos, setting up your iPhone on a tripod and making a video of how you do X service or how you do whatever, process or whatever it might be. Like for us, it could be installing like an ADA parking stall. What's so difficult about setting up a camera and just documenting, walking through how we do it? Because that way, when I hire someone to do it, I say, hey, check out this video before you come out to do this job today. So that way you at least have an idea of what we're doing here. So all that to be said, early on, it was just about getting the work done, not documenting the work. I think if we would have documented the work earlier on, we would have been able to scale a lot faster. The people that we had hired in the early years, they would have felt better equipped for success. They would have been able to see the vision a little bit more, a little bit clearer, and just be able to catch on faster, which that helps us grow the company at a faster rate, right? Because if the people can see where you're going and how you're going to get there, the vision of what you're trying to build, they're going to buy in more. They're going to catch on to what you're trying to accomplish and how they're going to help you get there, and how that's also going, how they're going to be a part of that. So in essence, don't be afraid of, once you get something figured out, once you get a process and a system dialed in, go ahead and figure out a way to document it. Like I've talked about before, you don't need to create the systems and processes. You just need to document them. You will figure it out as you go. Just make sure to turn on the camera or open up the laptop or the iPad and start documenting exactly what you're doing. The next thing that I want to talk about that I wish I would have done a little earlier on, right? Culture is built on day one. So their company culture is made up of a ton of different things. But ultimately, it starts with you as the leader. You as a leader, you set the tone of the culture. How are you showing up every day? Are you showing up frantic, behind, stressed out, unapproachable, irritable, or are you showing up positive, optimistic, organized? You got things down to a T and know exactly what's happening, where, when it needs to happen, who's doing what, making sure that your team is equipped for everything that you need to have, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, you want to make sure that when you start hiring individuals, that's that next big thing when it comes to the culture and how it's getting built. If you're just hiring people that pass the what some people refer to as the fog a mirror test, if they have a heartbeat and they can breathe, fog up a mirror, and you hire them, well, that's a great way to start with absolutely no culture in mind whatsoever. And so nonetheless, you want to make sure that as you're doing that, and as you're hiring people and you're building out that team, you want to make sure that you're getting the right people for the culture you're trying to build. If you want a culture of dialed in and aggressive and organized, on-time individuals, make sure that you're starting that from the get-go, right? Because eventually you're going to find yourself in a position where you got to change the people or change the people. And what I mean by that, if you didn't catch on, is you're going to have to start trying to take time away from operating your business and instead trying to teach people how to become the type of culture you want. Or if they're not going to be able to adapt to that and make the changes necessary, then you're going to need to swap them out for the people who are going to do so. But nonetheless, you want to make sure that you have, that you're putting intentionality behind building your culture. A high performance culture is not accidental. It is intentional. You have to put a lot of effort into doing that. And one of the things that I've realized over the last couple of years specifically, now that we have a really dialed in team in our company that I'd say on average we've had here for about 2 years or so, is we've really put a lot of effort and emphasis on our core values of our company. And what we did, I've had core values for many years, but what we really started doing the last couple of years was recognizing the core values on a daily basis. We have, an award and recognition system based around our core values. And I believe our core values is the utmost important part of why our culture is the way that it is. If you ask anybody who works in our company what their favorite part about working here is, they say it's the people. Well, what makes up the culture? The people. So the fact that we've put the right emphasis on getting the right people on the bus, but then also making sure that we have the right boundaries in which we operate by, being our core values, we have created a culture here that people genuinely enjoy being a part of. That doesn't mean every day here is sunshine and rainbows. It doesn't mean that everybody here is, millionaires and just living the, life of luxury. We're all putting in the work. We're making things happen, but we're doing it around a set of values that define who we are day in and day out. that we do not waver from, we do not negotiate, and we do not tolerate anything less than excellence when it comes to them. So making sure that culture is extremely important from the get-go is something I wish I would have done earlier on, because it would have provided, again, going back to the vision for the individuals that are coming on board, it would have provided a vision for who we are, what we stand for, and where we're going to go, but also give us those boundaries and those guidelines in which that we want to operate. So one of the quotes that I have here says, a sales culture plus customer obsession equals performance. And so making sure that we're constantly driving to push ourselves forward through sales, but we make sure that, we're creating a great experience, which is one of our core values. And we're creating that great experience, not just for our employees, not just for our vendors, but especially for our customers. We want to make sure that we are being, obsessed with how that client perceives their interaction with our company. And if we do that, right, if we have that driving sales culture that we want to keep pushing, and we also are obsessed with our clients and their experience with us, that's going to create the performance we need as a company to continue growing and flourishing year over year. So, recapping that, culture, it's built on day one. Don't forget that even if you're a solo operator or you're starting out with a team of 10 right off the bat, you're setting the tone day one. And I can tell you right now, it's a whole lot easier to set the culture and the tone that you want from the get-go versus getting several years into it and trying to redefine it. So take that for what you like. The last topic that I got here is, early on, I wish I would have learned to invest in myself in order to be a better leader. I think I've always had an interest in, personal growth, personal development. Right around the time I got into Proline full time is when I think I started taking leadership and personal development more seriously. I actually remember a time where I was working at the fire station. I was up in the bunks. It was probably a Sunday afternoon or something like that. We'd gotten all the station duties done and got training done, so on and so forth. And I was up there reading. I just kind of recently started picking up, reading on a regular basis. And the books early on that I was reading kind of varied. It was all, personal development, business, leadership. I got into John Maxwell pretty early on. I got into Stephen Covey, who I believe wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So I kind of got into that. But I remember so vividly one day reading a book by Dean Graziosi called Millionaire Success Habits. And that gives you a little glimpse on the, where my brain was at. We're talking about 7 years ago now. It's 2025. So back in 2018, I was in my downtime, when other guys are, scrolling on social media, they're watching sports, watching, doing whatever that they want to do with their downtime. I'm up there reading a book, called Millionaire Success Habits. And sure, the title sounds cheesy, right? And if I go back and read part of it, there's probably some stuff I would look back on and think is a little bit cheesy. But I remember how impactful that book was for me, because it was bringing to light things that were truly very simple concepts, very simple habits, very simple ideas that I saw myself being able to be able to accomplish, right? To be able to live out day in and day out. So that way I could one day maybe be a millionaire, right? And for all those who say, well, millionaire is not the goal, whatever, then you have your own goals. Go read, Perfect Dad Success Habits, or, Perfect Wife Success Habits. I don't care. Find whatever your pleasure is. That's that. At the time, I needed to make money, right? I had a wife in nursing school. We had just paid for it all out of pocket on a payment plan. I was working 4 jobs, trying to figure life out. I needed to make money. So how do I, $1 million sounds pretty good right about then. But nonetheless, getting back to my point here, I realized as I was reading these things about, what these authors and these coaches and these business people had written about how to become successful, how to become influential, how to become, whatever it is that you want to become, it was a whole lot of strategies and tactics that I was able to actually pick up on, right? That I was able to start doing on my own. Some of those things were, the reading, like I mentioned. I started just reading pretty much daily. Just anytime I had some time, just, pick up the book and read a little bit. Eventually that transformed into my routine of reading in the mornings, because as the business got busier, life got busier. And about the only time my life isn't busy is, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, before most of the rest of the world is waking up, starting with emails and text messages and updates. So one of the routines, like I said, was reading that I picked up. Another one that I picked up from reading was my mindset, right? I had to really pay attention about how I was looking at things day in and day out. Was I being optimistic or was I being pessimistic? Was I envisioning the overcoming what we needed to overcome, or was I was just dwelling on the obstacles that I was facing? And so I had to figure out really what's the mindset that I need to have for a successful day, a successful week, successful month, and a successful year. And I had to get that dialed in and start to think about that in a different way. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about early on with the systems and processes. When you're a solo operator, your mindset is just get the job done, get paid, and get on to the next one, because you're on that treadmill, right? If you stop running on the treadmill, everything stops. And so your mindset is just survive, survive, survive. But eventually I had to start thinking about, well, if I want this to be more than just a job, a glorified job with a whole lot of extra liability and responsibility and headaches, then I'm going to need to figure out how to see actually, using my mindset to see how this is going to become bigger, how it's going to grow, how it's going to become a business, not just a job. And so getting to a point where I could start shifting my mindset into building a business and not just a really, really stressful job is something I had to take on. In addition to that helped with that as well is it was around the 2017-18 time that I really started getting into my fitness. I started getting into wanting to make sure that I was putting myself in the best mental state possible. At the same time, I was double dipping a little bit, because that's when I found too that I enjoy listening to podcasts or listening to audiobooks the most. While I was working out, I was taking in new information to help my mindset, to help my intelligence, to help my overall ability to be able to just learn about what it was that I was trying to become, not just for the business, but me as a man, as a leader, and as an individual. And so getting into that fitness routine, I realized that I started having some of the best ideas for my life in general, right? My personal life, my professional life, my business, my friends, my hobbies, anything that I was wanting to do. Some of the best ideas that I had would come right at my peaks of working out, right when my heart rate was just pegging out and I felt like I just couldn't do a whole lot more, is when I started unlocking those ideas that I was like, man, if I did this, and this, then I could do that, and that. And so getting myself into the right mindset, as well as combining it with a correct physical state, it was unlocking new and bigger opportunities than what I had previously done. To this day, my routine in the morning is to wake up in the morning. I have my morning coffee. I do my devotional, get in the right mindset. I read my business or leadership development book. Again, getting in the right mindset, learning new things, taking in new ideas. And then I pretty much go straight to the gym, because I want to get myself in the right mindset, get to the gym and get at my peak physical state for the day. And then that's when everything unlocks and starts flowing. When I do that, when I have that routine, I'm able to show up as the best leader as possible, right? Back to the point here, investing in myself as a leader early on would have helped us grow this business faster and bigger. But at the time, it was focused on just doing the work, doing the work, doing the work. And so how I would have figured out that balance, I don't exactly have an exact answer for that, right? Because every job is different, every business is different, every industry is different, all the requirements are different. But nonetheless, one of the big things that everyone wants to tell you is hustle, 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 and figure it all out as you go. I think it's bullshit. I think hustle culture is a complete myth. I think it's overrated. I think it's something that people use to try and sell, the shortcut to $1 million, the secret to success, the whatever the thing is that people are selling, right? That you and I both have all probably been victim to, that we've bought, we've invested in, and we're like, well, that was kind of dumb. But nonetheless, it's a mentality that is sold. I think if we focus more on building ourselves to be a leader worth following, to be a business owner worth trusting, and to be an individual worth respecting, I think we're going to make a whole lot bigger progress at a whole lot faster pace. And so I think as we kind of finish this up, guys, those are kind of the big three things that came to mind that I wanted to share with you today. Partly this is a little bit selfish because I think this is going to be fun to look back on a year from now. Maybe it'll be a replay episode when I'm out of town or doing something where I can't get in front of the camera. But nonetheless, those three things of making sure that we're focusing early on building and documenting the systems and processes to what we do, how we do it, why we do it, when we do it. Making sure that we focus on building a culture from day one, whether it's just me or a team of individuals, and then making sure to invest in myself as the leader. Because if I'm not a leader worth following, if I'm not a business owner worth respecting and trusting, and if I'm not an individual worth trusting and respecting, then it really doesn't matter what we're trying to build. And so at the end of the day, one of the things I got here, it says you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be intentional. And I think that I've learned more specifically over the last year, the saying of perfection is the enemy of progress is very true. I think the more intentional you are with what you're trying to do, the more progress you will end up making. The perfection, if you can get that dialed in, that's just an added bonus. So I tell people all the time that we aim for perfection, but we expect excellence, right? Because no human is perfect, no system is perfect, no business is perfect, but we aim for it. So that way, when we expect excellence, if we fall short of perfection on something, we are still better than most. And I think if you're able to do that, if you're able to focus on some of these things early on in your business journey or get refocused on them if you're later on in your business journey, I think you're going to start to dial in some of the things that you might be missing. So guys, as always, I appreciate you tuning in. If you could go ahead and drop a comment down below on some things you're working on, shoot me a message. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Or even better yet, share it with a friend. Because ultimately, guys, I'm just doing this for you guys. It's fun for me to get to sit out here and talk about what I get to do, but I want to make sure that it's providing some value to someone, somewhere, some way. So as always, I appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you next week. And if you notice the TV behind me shut off, well, technical difficulties.